we are going to work on the very basics of animation in our scene and look at the timeline and just how to do the very basics of animation. It's actually fairly easy to get started, and then a lot of the experimentation will be up to you. So start with any basic object. Let's start with I'm going to start with a torus. Let's smooth shade. And I'm going to, first of all, the very top of the screen, I'm going to click on the tab that says animation. And when you get the animation tab, you get several windows open up. The kind of default on the top left, you have basically your camera's view. So it's sort of showing you when you animate this object or you move it or you do whatever you want to it, the camera is going to be seeing this view. Of course, we can manipulate that later, but for now that's just what that is. On the right is your generic viewport, just made a little bit smaller, so you can see that if you zoom in and out here, you're not really affecting the camera view, you're just looking at the view. And most importantly for us, the bottom, which is your timeline. Okay, so the default timeline is set up to 250 frames. So if you press down at the very bottom, if you press the play animation button or the space bar on your keyboard, the timeline will just start to move, and it's going to play 250 frames, independent frames, and then it'll loop back around to the beginning. So this stuff should be fairly intuitive for you. If you press spacebar again, it stops. You can also press the pause button down at the bottom to stop. There's a record button, which we'll get to later, but really you can also just left click and drag to any frame you want, and it's again very intuitive and pretty easy to work with. So spacebar, start and stop, bring it back to the 0. You can also use this little left arrow to jump to the end point here. All right. So let's see, to make your very first very basic animation, you can animate the scale, rotation, and location of any object. So let's do just that. All right, I'm going to start with my object here in the scene at its default position, and I'm going to make sure that my animation time slider is over here to frame 1. All right, so if you hover your mouse in your scene and you click on or press the letter I on your keyboard, you're going to get this menu that pops up. For now, just choose the one that I'm hovering over, which is location, rotation, scale, lock, rot, scale. Okay, this is setting the location, the rotation, and the scale of the object right there. So when you do that, down your timeline, you also notice it's called a dope sheet here. You'll get these 4 yellow dots, which are just sort of showing, you can actually open this up a little more and see, it's just showing you all the location, rotation, and scale attributes in numerical value of your torus. So it's 0, 0, 0. It's all set to right here. So if I play my animation, well, nothing happens because the object hasn't moved from one place to another. So very easily, why don't you just drag your timeline over to, say, frame 50. And once you do that, you can go back into your scene and do basically anything you want. I'm going to hit G and grab the object, and I'm going to y-axis, I'm going to drag it over here. I'm also going to scale it down. All right, so I moved it from here to here and just hit the letter I and create a new keyframe. Now if you drag your slider back to 0 and press the play button, it should go from 0 to 50 frames. And what Blender does, and what all this kind of animation software does, is it creates the frames in between the two frames you created. It's called tweening. It's basically understanding that you're making a smooth transition from one point to another in terms of location, rotation, and scale. So that's a very basic movement. You can go to a further frame, let's say frame 100, grab the object, move it somewhere else. Oops. And hit I, set a new keyframe. So now we've got 3 keyframes running. Let's go to frame 150. I'm going to grab it and move it over here, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees this way. Hit I, location, rotation, scale. Now, let's do one more here at 200, just to kind of show how this goes. Rotate it again, some random amount, and scale it way up, and hit I, and hit this. So now I've got this donut moving around in space, changing its rotation, scale, and location. All very smooth transitions. Okay, so one thing you can also do in this animation is you can copy keyframes from one location and paste them somewhere else. You can do that so that you could create a loop, for instance. So the way that this works, if I wanted to actually create a loop, a perfect loop, I would take this first keyframe over here, and I would hit Shift D to duplicate it, and I could just drag it all the way with my left mouse and left click it at frame 250. Now if I did this properly, I should be able to play this, and frame 250 and frame 0 will be the same, so it should perfectly loop, which it does. So that's one use of the duplicating, or yeah, Shift D, you duplicate, just like you duplicate an object, you can duplicate keyframes. So now you can experiment with basically anything here, but I'd like you to also notice that you can animate any object or camera or light. So just like I animated the movement of this object, you can see that in the left hand side, sometimes it goes off camera and whatnot. If you click on your camera, it has its own timeline down here, and there's no keyframe set. So you can simply hit I, and you're going to set, we've got our camera selected, should be able to hit I, set the location, rotation, scale of our camera. And if we wanted to, let's say, go into this view here, hit N to open this up, lock our camera. So now we're going to be moving our camera view. Let's say zoom in on the object. Sorry, let me move to another keyframe. I'm going to move to keyframe 100. I can go over here in my camera view and I can, let's say, put it back in frame, zoom into it, hit I again, hit I again with the camera selected, and now I created 2 keyframes where the camera is moving. You know, I did a very bad job. I didn't track the object at all, but you can see that if I zoom out far enough, both the object and the camera are animated. That's the point I'm trying to make. So this is something you can play with on your own. You can also animate the way a light moves. So I could have the light sitting here in the beginning of the animation, and I could hit I, and then I could go to frame 100. And in that position, I could grab the light and move it somewhere else and hit I. And in this case now, if I go into, let's say, rendered view, and I watch it, well, the light's going to also change. Right. So light, it moved, the camera moved, the object moved. All right, so I'm going to leave the video there. allowing you to just experiment, animate some things, have fun, play around with multiple objects. Maybe they pass it by each other. It's a really kind of fun, fairly intuitive way of working in Blender.